full of crap. How's that? The voter file, Riverside County does not seem to care much about ensuring that the information at the registrar's office is updated. So for a candidate like me who is new to politics, new to the whole system, and really insistent upon running a grassroots campaign, we have a very difficult time actually reaching voters because the information that we have from the registrar of voters is bad. Addresses where people don't live there anymore, phone numbers that go to nowhere, emails that bounce back. It's really kind of frustrating. But if we take that aside, right? Let's not blame the voter file. Let's not blame someone else. We have a problem with the perception of people from outside of our district. When you live in a blue or even a swing district, it's very easy to go, if you do A, B, C, and D, you're going to reach your voters. If you look at the 42nd on a map, just the outline of the map, it is one of the most bizarre, weird cut districts. It's this great big gigantic X. It looks like somebody dropped ink on the page and then smashed it together and went, oh, that looks good. And so we also are compared with being Greater Los Angeles, and we're not. We are not Greater Los Angeles at all. We've got serious traffic problems that keep people from some of these other blue districts from being able to even get in here and do any kind of grassroots work. We have a county Democratic Party that was run by a person who used it as a personal social club as opposed to actually an organization that could uplift and empower Democrats or anyone to run for office. And we don't have press. We have a local newspaper that has quite an interesting amount of readership, but their editorial staff has been pro-Calvert ever since he got into office. So there's not a lot of press. And, they write articles about me that come up when I've done something brash or I've made an offhanded, snide, sarcastic remark that I should have bit my tongue about. And then that's when the reporter calls me and he says, oh, can you comment on this? It's like, oh, here we go again. And despite reaching out to him and saying, hey, can we at least just do a candidate profile? Can we at least do something like that? The answer is we're too busy. We have an entire district to cover and you're only just one person. And so it's really this strange black hole. We don't have television stations. Los Angeles isn't interested in what's going on in the Inland Empire. And so it really seems from the establishment part of the Democratic Party to other groups that are popping up that are saying they're working on, flipping all of the districts and working with all progressive candidates. Like we're getting the door shut on us across the board. So what we're doing is we're building something here all by ourselves. And when I say ourselves, I'm talking about the most incredible team of women that I have ever met. And every one of them, only two of them have ever worked in any kind of political apparatus before. They were trained by OFA and worked on Obama's campaign. One of them started in 2008. The other one didn't start until 2012. And it is a volunteer movement of people who, well, I'll say women, and then our guys who volunteer to show up to canvass and write postcards and that sort of thing. But the leadership of my campaign is all women who were motivated by similar experiences that I had after the November 2016 election to make a difference. So we are having to build a political apparatus from the ground up in the Inland Empire, especially the 42nd. We have 40% Republican registration, 30% Democrat, and 30% no party preference. So if we follow the playbook where it says do direct mail, put up some lawn signs, and that should do it, but maybe by some radio and TV ads, we're still not going to reach the number of people we need to reach. So we have to go across the aisle. We have to talk to every single voter. And so we're kind of breaking the rules and shifting the mold for how politics are done. And that's kind of alienated us from those groups that prefer to look at how much money you've raised. And that's another interesting piece of the 42nd. When we think of people who make over $200,000, which the 2017 November tax cuts focused on, we only have 410 people in the entire 42nd congressional district who earn over $200,000 a year. Average income is $56,000 a year, and that's gone down 12.2% since 2007. So we're not seeing a rebound in the Inland Empire. Maybe unemployment is down, but I'll tell you what I'm watching is retail and fast food. That's the market that's growing here. Our largest employer is a prison. It's a totally different place than Los Angeles or Santa Monica or Pasadena or San Francisco or even San Diego, where they have a Democratic Party that has been busting their behinds for the last 10 years to build the political infrastructure to make it possible for really good candidates to run and to win. We're starting from scratch. And people just don't know. We have a very, very uneducated electorate, not because they're not smart, because they don't know what they care about, but because we don't have anything in place, not in schools to teach about civics, not in community organizations to energize activists and volunteers. We don't have anything. We've knocked on doors where someone has said, I've lived in this house for 19 years and no one has ever knocked on my door to talk about how I feel about issues. And that's what we're up against. I mean, it's a challenge, but we're not daunted by it. I mean, even as a daunting challenge, my team is committed. We're knocking on doors. We're sending text messages. We're writing emails. My team in the last month, for the month of August, they sent over 15,000 handwritten postcards to registered no party preference and Republican women in our district to tell them about me. It's been amazing.
That's excellent. Well, I want to ask about education. So
yeah.
I know on your list of issues, education is certainly one of them, and you have a lot of experience in education. So I'd like to know what you would like to see happening in education. You know, I think there's a lot that's broken around the country when it comes to education, but I know there's also a lot of people like you with really good ideas. And so I'm curious what you would like to see happening.
One of the biggest issues with education is what we talk about is funding. We don't spend nearly enough per student on education, and we don't necessarily put the money that we have in education in the classroom and for the students. Now, I admire the teachers in Oklahoma and West Virginia and across the country who stood up and said, yeah, it isn't just about the fact that we can't afford to live in our communities because we can't afford mortgages because we get paid so badly, but take a look at these broken chairs. Take a look at the date on this textbook. There are some really serious issues, especially with the idea of the federal government mandating things for local and state educational systems that they aren't willing to back up with the funding necessary to make it happen. And then, of course, you've got the argument that there's a lot of money that's already going into education and it hasn't done any good. And you're right, because education has become a gigantic bureaucracy. And as opposed to having teachers and parents and students in at the table on having these conversations about what they need for their schools, we have this mentality of one size fits all. So if we do A for a school in Beverly Hills, then we have to do the same thing for the school in Paris, California, where I teach. And that doesn't make any sense because despite the fact that kids are kids, the issues in the community based upon need vary from school to school. We may need more career and technical education programs in a lower income school where the jobs in the community call for that. So a couple of things I want to see. Number one is I want us to put our money where our mouth is when it comes to funding education. And I'm tired of education being one of those things that is pulled apart based upon the politician of the day or the politician of the month. I'd love to get into Congress and shut down Betsy DeVos because she has no idea what she's doing. But that's a totally different issue. So when it comes to putting our money where our mouth is, we need to go into the schools and we need to talk to teachers, we need to talk to students, we need to talk to parents about what this particular school needs. For example, some of our local schools have a lot of students who aren't doing well because that traditional book learning is not what they like. And I'm not talking about throwing out the books by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm talking about doing what we used to do when I was in high school, where we supplemented the book learning with hands-on programs. And during the Bush administration, No Child Left Behind decimated a lot of those programs. They said, no, every kid needs to read and write and do math at the college level. Well, that's fine, except for some of those kids that have smarts that transcend standardized tests, where they can look at a computer, pull it apart, and put it all back together better, or they can do that with a car, or they can do that by building something. Where did those programs go? Well, they got defunded. And we're now just starting to rebuild, putting art and STEAM and hands-on programs back into our schools. And we need to have the money there to really build programs on campuses with the equipment and the modern technology that they need so that kids can hit the ground running if they're not going to go to a trade school or a community college or a four-year university after high school. The second thing that I really believe needs to be focused on is mental health services in every one of our school campuses. And right now we don't have it. We don't have it. We did get in California an assembly bill that required every school that works with seventh graders and up to have a comprehensive suicide prevention, awareness, and aftermath program. But we've got school districts even around the state of California that aren't implementing those programs, that aren't paying attention and being held accountable to this law. And across the country, we're talking about mental health issues. We talk about school shootings. We talk about issues that are linked to, in some cases, not all cases, kids who were on a radar that had nowhere to turn to when someone said, hey, I'm concerned about this person. I'm concerned about what they're writing in class. I'm concerned about what they're posting online. And we call law enforcement. And law enforcement, with their jobs, are too busy to investigate every concerned, notification about a kid at school. So where are our social workers? Where are our therapists? We have a lot of counseling offices that are geared toward academic achievement, not social emotional well-being. And that's a problem. So we need to fund mental health services. We need counselors in every single school, and we need licensed professionals who can have group counseling sessions and talk to children and educate parents on the myths of mental health awareness. The idea that if you talk about suicide, everybody's going to commit suicide. If you talk about depression, it's going to make people depressed. I mean, these are real myths that are still perpetuated across this country, and it's keeping people from being able to get the help that they need and the help that they need. So that's another issue. Putting our emphasis on the entire student and not just the academic student is going to make a huge difference in making education work across the country. And those are two of my biggest priorities.
Yeah, I would certainly love to see. I mean, I think, more teachers in Congress would certainly help.
Right.
But even just more moms in Congress.
Kelly, you make a really good point. I mean, women make up 51% of the population. Why don't we see ourselves in government? Why don't we see ourselves in government? We are less than 20% of Congress. We are 51% of the population. What is it about women that we can't still, after all of these years, and granted, though, we've only had the voting right for less than 100 years, and I understand that as well, but why don't we see ourselves in government? And that's one of the things that I'm fighting for. I realize that I don't see myself in government, so I need to be myself in government. And I want, it's a thing that I comment on a lot when I'm trying to explain the importance of me running and talking about being a woman. It is important that I'm a woman. It is important that I'm not a typical politician. It is important that I'm not a part of this broken system and that I want to get in and fight for it, because I describe it as, white men are at the table. They just are. And it's not because they have money. It's because, they're white men, and we live in a patriarchal society, right? And white women happen to be in the room. At least we're in the room. And so my job is to keep my foot in the door so everyone else gets in, women of color and men of color, and open up the voice for communities that are represented in demographics across this country, but aren't represented in government across this country. And a big part of that is getting money out of politics, because two things I am asked over and over and over again: how much money have you raised? And how much time have you spent on calling people to beg them for money? And the answer to that is, it shouldn't matter. And number two is very little. Why? Because that money is not going to change the conversation when it comes to knocking on a door and talking to an actual voter in person about what matters to them. But it's money in politics that is doing a lot of the damage. It's congressmen and women who spend most of their 2-year tenure making sure that their campaign re-election coffers are full, as opposed to actually doing the hard work. And I'm not saying all of them, but I'm saying a lot of them. And that's definitely true of the representative that I have. And we've got to fix that.
Is there anything else that you would like to make sure that we talk about?
I definitely want people to believe that their vote matters. Maybe I am not the average person's cup of tea. I am loud. I am independent. I am strong-willed. I'm opinionated. I'm a fighter. My biggest strength is my passion, and that is also my biggest weakness, is my passion and the trouble it gets me into. However, every voice, every vote matters. And it's something that I heard from a city council candidate all the way in Maryland. If our vote didn't matter, people would not spend so much time, so much money trying to keep us from casting it. So I want people to vote. I want them to believe that everything that matters to